Ever wonder why your Dataverse pipeline feels like it's built out of duct tape and bad decisions? You're not alone. Most of us end up picking between Synapse Link and Dataflow Gen 2 without a clear idea of which one actually fits. That's what kills projects, picking wrong. Here's the promise. By the end of this, you'll know which to choose based on refresh frequency, storage ownership and cost, and rollback safety. The three things that decide whether your project hums along or blows up at 2 a.m. For context, Dataflow Gen 2 caps out at 48 refreshes per day about every 30 minutes, while Synapse Link can push as fast as every 15 minutes if you're willing to manage compute. Hit subscribe to the M365 Show newsletter at m365.show for the full cheat sheet and follow the M365 Show LinkedIn page for MVP live streams. Now let's put the scalpel on the table and talk about control. The scalpel on the table, Synapse Link's control obsession. You ever meet that one engineer who measures coffee beans with a digital scale? Not eyeball it, not a scoop, but grams on the nose. That's the Synapse Link personality. This tool isn't built for quick fixes or close enough. It's built for the teams who want to tune, monitor, and control every moving part of their pipeline. If that's your style, you'll be thrilled. If not, there's a good chance you'll feel like you've been handed a jet engine manual when all you wanted was a light switch. At its core, Synapse Link is Microsoft giving you the sharpest blade in the drawer. You decide which Dataverse tables to sync. You can narrow it to only the fields you need, dictate refresh schedules, and direct where the data lands. And here's the important part. It exports data into your own Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2 account, not into Microsoft's managed Dataverse Lake. That means you own the data, you control access, and you satisfy those governance and compliance folks who ask endless questions about where data physically lives. But that freedom comes with a trade-off. If you want Delta files that Fabric tools can consume directly, it's up to you to manage that conversion, either by enabling Synapse's transformation or spinning up Spark jobs. No one's doing it for you. Control and flexibility, yes, but also your compute bill, your responsibility. And speaking of responsibility, setup is not some two-click wizard. You're provisioning Azure resources, an active subscription, a resource group, a storage account with hierarchical namespace enabled, plus an app registration with the right permissions or a service principal with data lake roles. Miss one setting and your sync won't even start. It's the opposite of a low-code just works setup. This is infrastructure first, so anyone running it needs to be comfortable with the Azure portal and permissions at a granular level. Let's go back to that freedom. The draw here is selective syncing and near real-time refreshes. With Synapse Link, refreshes can run as often as every 15 minutes. For revenue forecasting dashboards or operational reporting, think sales orders that need to appear in Fabric within the hour. That precision is gold. Teams can engineer their pipelines to pull only the tables they need, partition the outputs into optimal formats, and minimize unnecessary storage. It's exactly the kind of setup you'd want if you're running pipelines with transformations before shipping data into a warehouse or lakehouse. But precision has a cost. Every refresh you tighten, every table you add, every column you leave in just in case spins up compute jobs. That means resources in Azure are running on your dime, which also means finance is involved sooner than later. The bargain you're striking is clear. Total control plus table-level precision equals heavy operational overhead if you're not disciplined with scoping and scheduling. Let me share a cautionary tale. One enterprise wanted fine-grained control and jumped into Synapse Link with excitement. They scoped tables carefully, enabled hourly syncs, even partitioned their exports. It worked beautifully for a while, until multiple teams set up overlapping links on the same dataset. Suddenly, they had redundant refreshes running at overlapping intervals, duplicated data spread across multiple lakes, and governance meetings that felt like crime scene investigations. The problem wasn't the tool, it was that giving everyone surgical precision with no central rules led to chaos. The lesson: governance has to be baked in from day one, or Synapse Link will expose every gap in your processes. From a technical angle, it's impressive. Data lands in Parquet, not some black box service. You can pipe it wherever you want, lakehouse, warehouse, or even external analytics platforms. That open format and storage ownership are exactly what makes engineers excited. Synapse Link isn't trying to hide the internals, it's exposing them and expecting you to handle them properly. If your team already has infrastructure for pipeline monitoring, cost management, and security, Synapse Link slots right in. If you don't, it can sink you fast. So who's the right audience? If you're a data engineer who wants to trace each byte, control scheduling down to the quarter hour, and satisfy compliance by controlling exactly where the data lives, Synapse Link is the right choice. A concrete example: you're running near real-time sales feeds into Fabric for forecasting. You only need 4 tables, but you need them every 15 minutes. You want to avoid extra Dataverse storage costs while running downstream machine learning pipelines. Synapse Link makes perfect sense there. If you're a business analyst who just wants to light up a Power BI dashboard, this is the wrong tool. It's like giving a surgical kit to someone who just wanted to open Amazon packages. Bottom line, Synapse Link gives surgical-grade control of your Dataverse integration. That's freeing if you have the skills, infrastructure, and budgets to handle it. But without that, it's complexity overload. And let's be real, most teams don't need Scalpel-level control just to get a dashboard working. Sometimes speed and simplicity mean more than precision. And that's where the other option shows up. Not the Scalpel, but the multi-tool. Sometimes you don't need surgical precision. You just need something fast, cheap, and easy enough to get the job done without bleeding everywhere. The Swiss Army knife that breaks nail files, Dataflow Gen 2's low-code magic. If Synapse Link is for control freaks, Dataflow Gen 2 is for the rest of us who just want to see something on a dashboard before lunch. Think of it as that cheap multi-tool hanging by the cash register at the gas station. It's not elegant, it's not durable, but it can get you through a surprising number of situations. The whole point here is speed, moving Dataverse data into Fabric without needing a dedicated data engineer lurking behind every button click. Where Synapse feels like a surgical suite, Dataflow Gen 2 is more like grabbing the screwdriver out of the kitchen drawer. Any Power BI user can pick tables, apply a few drag-and-drop transformations, and send the output straight into Fabric lakehouses or warehouses. No SQL scripts, no complex Azure provisioning. Analysts, low-code makers, and even the guy in marketing who runs 6 dashboards can spin up a data flow in minutes. Demo time. Imagine setting up a customer engagement dashboard, pulling leads and contact tables straight from Dataverse. You'll have visuals running before your coffee goes cold. Sounds impressive, but the gotchas show up the minute you start scheduling refreshes. Here's the ceiling you can't push through. Dataflow Gen 2 runs refreshes up to 48 times a day. That's once every 30 minutes at best. No faster. And unlike Synapse, you don't get true incremental loads or row-level updates. What happens is one of two things: append mode, which keeps adding to the delta table in one leg, or overwrite mode, which completely replaces the table contents during each run. That's great if you're testing a demo, but it can be disastrous if you're depending on precise tracking or rollback. A lot of teams miss this nuance and assume it works like a transactionally safe system. It's not. It's bulk append or wholesale replace. I've seen the pain firsthand. One finance dashboard was hailed as a success story after a team stood it up in under an hour with Dataflow Gen 2. 2 weeks later, their nightly override job was wiping historical rows. To leadership, the dashboard looked fine. Under the hood, years of transaction history were half scrambled and permanently lost. That's not a quirk. That's structural. Dataflow doesn't give you row-level delta tracking or rollback states. You either keep every refresh stacked up with append, risking bloat and duplication, or overwrite and pray the current version is correct. Now, let's talk money. Synapse makes you pull out the checkbook for Azure storage and compute. With Dataflow Gen 2, it's tied to Fabric capacity units. That's a whole different kind of silent killer. It doesn't run up Azure GB charges. Instead, every refresh eats into a pool of capacity. If you don't manage refresh frequency and volume, you'll burn CUs faster than you expect. At first, you barely notice. Then, during midday loads, your workspace slows to a crawl because too many data flows are chewing the same capacity pie. The users don't blame poor scheduling. They just say Fabric is slow. That's how sneaky the cost trade-off works. And don't overlook governance here. Dataflow Gen 2 feels almost too open-handed. You can pick tables, filter columns, and mash them into golden datasets right up until refresh jobs collide. I've watched teams unknowingly set up dev and prod data flows pointing at the same destination tables, overwriting each other at 2 a.m. That's not a one-off disaster. It's a pattern if nobody enforces workspaces, naming, and ownership rules. And unlike Synapse, you don't get partial rollback options. Once that override runs, the old state is gone for good. Another key guardrail, Dataflow Gen 2 is a one-way street. In Fabric, links into Dataverse are read-only. You don't get an event-driven or supported path to write data back into Dataverse through Dataflow Gen 2. If you need to round-trip updates, you're back to API calls or pipelines. So if you've heard someone pitch Dataflow as a full-sync engine, stop them. It's read from Dataverse into Fabric. Period. The right fit is clear. Dataflow Gen 2 shines in prototypes and business intelligence reporting, where near real-time isn't critical. Pull some Dataverse tables, do some transformations with no code, and serve dashboards in Power BI. It eliminates the barrier to entry. But move beyond that. HR reporting, compliance snapshots, or financial records with rollback needs, and it looks shaky fast. Because governance, refresh limits, and override risks don't magically solve themselves. Bottom line, this tool is perfect for analysts who value speed and simplicity. If you're building dashboards and need a fast, low-code pipeline, it's a winner. But don't mistake it for robust ETL or enterprise-grade sync. It's a pocket multi-tool, handy in a pinch, but the wrong instrument for major surgery. And that distinction matters most when your boss stops clapping for the demo and finance hands you the actual bill. Because while simplicity feels free, you'll pay for it in capacity, storage, and wasted refresh jobs if you don't lock things down. And that unseen bill, that's the part most teams underestimate. the hidden bill that eats budgets alive. Here's the part nobody tells you up front. It's not just about choosing a tool, it's about who gets stuck with the bill. Fabric Link, Synapse Link, Dataflow Gen 2, they sound like technical options, but each one hides its own budget trap. Pick wrong or set it up sloppy, and finance is going to ping you faster than a Teams notification storm. Take Fabric Link. On the surface, it feels like a gift. Hook up Dataverse, all your tables show up in Fabric, everyone claps. The problem hides in the fine print. Dataverse managed storage is expensive once you go past your licensed entitlement. How expensive? Industry write-ups warn that linking to Fabric can generate Dataverse managed delta tables that rack up very steep overage charges. Some estimates put it in the ballpark of $40,000 per terabyte per month when you're above quota. That's not a formal price sheet from Microsoft. That's analysis of what organizations have actually seen, and it's enough to make finance sweat bullets. I've watched a team light up their environment with hundreds of tables at once, not realizing Fabric grabs every eligible non-system table with change tracking. Within days, their storage bill looked like they were funding a data center in orbit. Now contrast that with Synapse Link. On paper, this looks like the cheaper path because you're not paying Dataverse's premium storage rates. Instead, Synapse drops the data into your own Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2 account. Azure Storage itself might run closer to $26 per terabyte per month, which is far from Dataverse's luxury pricing. But here's the asterisk, you also own the compute. If you need data in Delta format for Fabric, you'll be paying for Spark or Synapse jobs to convert it. Depending on your pipeline size, that might mean hundreds to a few $1,000s a month in compute charges. So yes, you've dodged the Dataverse bomb, but you've signed up for an ongoing relationship with Azure invoices. It's a choice between one big hammer or a steady metronome of smaller costs, and then there's Dataflow Gen 2. At first, it feels like free candy. No Dataverse overage to think about, no separate Azure storage account to manage. But look closer. Every refresh is really powered by Fabric capacity units, which are tied to your licensing. The more flows and refreshes you schedule, the faster you drain capacity. Push too hard, say 48 daily refreshes across multiple flows, and you'll see reports slow to a crawl. Not because Fabric broke, but because you ate all your own resources with refresh tasks. That's a classic trap. People think they've found the bargain option, then wonder why all their dashboards get sluggish right before the CFO presentation. These costs aren't random, they're traps you trigger by being too casual. Fabric Link auto-adds all tracked tables, Synapse happily lets you schedule compute until your Azure credit card cries, and Dataflow will chew through capacity because nobody bothered to space out refreshes. Finance doesn't care that it's just how Microsoft built it, or so that's all they see is a spike. And explaining these numbers on a Friday call is about as fun as asking for an audit exemption. So here's the survival trick. Put some guardrails in place before you flip the switch. Scope the tables before linking. Watch that first sync directory to see what Delta files are actually created. Track capacity usage like a hawk in Dataflow so you don't discover refresh collisions the hard way. And in Synapse, don't let random admins schedule 15-minute refreshes or spin up compute pools without oversight. These aren't rocket science fixes, just boring governance. But boring saves money a lot faster than clever hacks. And one last note. Don't fall for the temptation to just ingest everything from Dataverse because it's easier. That's how you end up paying luxury car money to store audit logs nobody queries. Be deliberate about what goes in. Decide what really needs Fabric visibility and what can stay where it is until there's a real business case. Less data moved means fewer costs, fewer surprises, and fewer emergency budget requests. Of course, bills aren't the only kind of disaster waiting to hit. Money explosions are ugly, but reliability failures are often worse. Because when things go wrong at 2 a.m., and the CFO can't see sales numbers, storage costs won't be the fire you're putting out. When things go sideways at 2 a.m., reliability and rollbacks. When data goes bad in the middle of the night, the real test isn't cost or setup. It's whether your pipeline can survive the punch. That's the heart of this section, reliability and rollbacks. Here's the baseline. Synapse Link and Dataflow Gen 2 handle failure in very different ways. Dataflow Gen 2 works on a batch model, either overwrite or append into delta tables in one lake. There's no built-in historic versioning. If the refresh overwrites with bad data, the previous good state is gone, unless you had a backup somewhere else. Synapse Link, on the other hand, uses Dataverse change tracking to send incremental updates into your own storage. That means you can implement file or partition level versioning and roll back to an earlier Parquet or Delta file if something corrupts. The difference is night and day when recovery matters. With Synapse Link, if you prepare correctly, you can backtrack. Data is written to ADLS Gen 2 as files you own. You can enable snapshots, partition strategies, and even keep multiple Delta versions around. If a refresh introduces corrupt records, file versions give you a ripcord. Recovery might not be instant, but you can rewind to a prior state without rebuilding the entire dataset. The catch? It requires discipline, version retention policies, automated monitoring, and snapshot schedules. Skip those and Synapse won't save you. Dataflow Gen 2, in contrast, keeps it simple. and painful when things go sideways. Since the storage inside Fabric doesn't retain historic versions, rollback is just rerunning the last refresh. If that refresh itself was flawed, you're stuck with garbage. And if the source system already advanced past that state, your history is permanently replaced. Append mode avoids total wipeouts, but it leaves you with duplication bloat and no clean rollback path. Either way, you're playing with fewer safety nets. Here's the kicker. Refresh frequency shapes how recoverable you are. Fabric Link connections typically run on an hourly cadence, which means if something breaks, you're looking at gaps no shorter than that. Dataflow Gen 2 can do up to 48 scheduled refreshes a day, about every 30 minutes, but no better. Synapse Link, by contrast, can go down to 15-minute increments. More check-ins means more checkpoints you can revert to. If you're running critical pipelines, that timing difference matters. Let me ground this with an example. One Synapse team structured 15-minute refreshes with file versions stored in their lake. When a batch pulled in corrupt transactions, they rewound to the prior slice, rehydrated the tables, and got reports back online before markets opened. It wasn't fun, but they survived with their sanity intact. Meanwhile, a Dataflow team in the same org ran daily override jobs. A failed overnight refresh blanked half their fact tables, and the only fix was rerunning the entire job. By the time it finished, users had been staring at error messages for hours. Same company, different tools, very different mornings. Rollbacks also get messy with governance. Cross-region storage can trip compliance issues if you try to restore from Europe into a US tenant. And if you're leaning on shortcut objects in Fabric, those don't always reconnect cleanly after restores. One admin likened it to swapping the hard drive after a failure but forgetting to plug the SATA cable back in. Your data might be back, but your reports are still broken. So what's the play here? A few survival tips. Design a snapshot policy if you're on Synapse. Keep file-level versions or delta retention for at least a few refresh windows. Always schedule backups before high-volume loads. And if you're relying on Dataflow Gen 2, never schedule your first refresh directly in production. Test in a sandbox first so you don't overwrite live tables with an untested transform. These aren't flashy features. They're guardrails that keep your phone quieter at 2 a.m. Bottom line, Dataflow Gen 2 trades resilience for simplicity. Once data is gone, it's gone. Synapse Link demands more setup pain, but it gives you actual rollback levers if things collapse. Your choice comes down to whether your org values ease of use today or protection during failure tomorrow. And that's the real fork in the road. Do you want the precise scalpel with rollback control or the fast multi-tool that might snap under stress? Let's line up the scenarios where each one actually makes sense. Choosing your weapon, the scalpel or the Swiss Army knife. This is where the theory becomes an actual decision. You've got Synapse Link on one side, Dataflow Gen 2 on the other, and Link to Fabric trying to sneak into the lineup. The wrong choice doesn't just slow you down. It wrecks governance, drains budgets, and leaves you patching pipelines with duct tape at odd hours. Here's the fast map. If you're running heavy, high-volume workloads that demand near real-time sync with clear governance, Synapse Link is where you go. It's the scalpel, sharp, precise, but very easy to cut yourself if you don't have the right hands on it. On the flip side, if you're mostly building BI dashboards, staging a few tables quickly, and letting Power BI users do their thing without calling IT every day, Dataflow Gen 2 is the Swiss Army knife. It's not a fine instrument, but it's flexible enough for the business units to build what they need. And then there's Link to Fabric, which creates Delta Parquet replicas in a Dataverse managed lake. By default, it pulls in all non-system tables that have track changes enabled. Handy, sure, but watch out. Storage costs can get ugly fast, and the fine print says there's a practical limit of around 1,000 tables before things start breaking. That's not a rumor, it's in the documentation. If you light up Link to Fabric for an entire environment without scoping, you're asking for a screaming match with finance. To keep it simple, ask yourself 3 questions. 1. Do you need sub-hour, near real-time updates? If yes, that's Synapse. If no, Dataflow or Fabric Link may work. 2. Do you have data engineers and the Azure muscle to manage storage and compute? If yes, Synapse is viable. If you don't and no one wants to maintain Spark jobs or RBAC in Azure, take it off the table. 3. Are most of your users non-engineers who just need to self-serve reports? If yes, that tilts you toward Dataflow Gen 2 or Link to Fabric. It's about putting the right tool with the right owners, not wishful thinking. Real-world example. One global enterprise ran Synapse Link for their regional sales pipelines, syncing as often as every 15 minutes. It fed forecasting dashboards where stale data meant missed revenue calls. Meanwhile, HR ran Dataflow Gen 2 for headcount reporting a couple of times per day. It was quick for analysts, didn't need an engineer at every step, and worked fine for quarterly reviews. Same company, 2 different approaches. That wasn't indecisive, it was mature. Hybrid is the right answer more often than not. The trap is pretending one tool should do everything. If you force Synapse into HR's hands in an analyst-heavy shop, those analysts spend half their time stuck in service tickets trying to debug pipelines they don't even want to own. If you drop Dataflow into mission-critical sales, you'll miss your refresh windows, overwrite data, and ruin trust in dashboards. Both disasters are caused by somebody trying to shove a square peg into a round hole. Let's get practical. Synapse equals control, change tracking, rollback paths, refreshes down to 15 minutes, full ownership of storage. But all of that comes at the cost of complexity, provisioning ADLS, managing compute, and paying attention to governance rules. Dataflow equals simplicity, self-service, drag and drop, and reports ready before your coffee's gone cold. The catch is its limits, 30-minute minimum refreshes, no built-in historic rollback, and hidden costs if you overschedule refreshes and crush capacity units. Linked to Fabric, it sits in the middle. Table-level simplicity, instant visibility in Fabric, but it consumes data versus storage. The most expensive of the three options if you go over your entitlements. Culture matters here more than any feature bullet point. Do you actually have engineers who want to build and monitor Synapse? If yes, give them the Scalpel. They'll put processes in place and appreciate the control knobs. If what you've really got is a BI shop full of Power BI champions, don't dump Synapse in their lap and blame them when it implodes. Put them on tools designed for them, like Dataflow or carefully scoped Link to Fabric. Staff first, tools second. The funny part is there's no glory in picking one tool for every job. The glory is in picking the right tool for the right workload. Some jobs demand a Scalpel. Some only need a multi-tool. Some can limp along with Fabric's auto-replica. There's no prize for pretending otherwise, only budget spikes, system failures, and late-night triage sessions that make you hate your tenant. So the real guidance is simple. Map your needs honestly, use Synapse where control is essential, Dataflow where speed and self-service matter, and Fabric Link only with scoped and governed tables. Hybrid isn't weakness, it's survival. And remember, the people aren't the failure point here. It's giving them the wrong knife and then acting surprised when things collapse. Which brings us to the heart of it. The problem was never that someone clicked wrong. It's that they were handed the wrong weapon for the job. So let's land the plane. Match tool to job. Synapse for engineering control and sub-hour syncs. Dataflow Gen 2 for fast analyst delivery. Link to Fabric for the fastest managed route. Just keep one eye on those data versus storage costs. That's the whole takeaway in one line. The cheat sheet lives at m365.show. Grab it so you don't have to replay this video during your next governance meeting. And follow the M365 Show LinkedIn page for MVP live streams where we break these patterns in real tenants. Final thought, don't blame the user, blame the pipeline you chose.